Right now we are going to make some fresh homemade cider with blueberries. I guess you could call this a blueberry hard cider. For this, of course, we are going to use a half a gallon about here of fresh cider. It's actually 89 fluid ounces and half a gallon is actually 64, so a little bit over half a gallon. A cup of blueberries here. Of course, I've got the yeast, which you can get on Amazon. It is this EC 1118 Lavlin yeast. I've got a airlock, a rubber bung, and an old growler here, which we will actually do the fermenting in. I've got a pot here to boil everything in, and a hydrometer. Now, traditionally, if you're making cider and you get it fresh in one of these jugs here, you can really pour it right into the fermenter and add the yeast. But since I'm going to be adding some blueberries here, I'm going to boil it for a couple minutes just to make sure that I get rid of any type of bacteria that might be floating around here. And then I want to check the gravity of the cider to see whether or not I want to add a little bit more sugar to see what the final alcohol content is going to be. So let's get started here. It's really easy to do this. First thing, I'll get the pot on here, get the stove turned on, and get the cider right in there. And if I didn't mention, this is about a half a gallon of cider. It's more than 64 ounces, which will fit in my fermenter. So I don't necessarily need to use all of it. I'm going to go close to 10 cups is about half a gallon. So that's what we'll shoot for, 10 cups there. And I can tell because I've got a marker on the inside of my pot. And we've got that on, so that'll start to heat up. In the meantime, I've got this bag, which is typically used for home brewers to add some hops. You could also do grains in there, but I am going to add my blueberries in here, and that reason is because I don't want a bunch of particles floating around in my cider. So this will keep everything separate, nice and clean. These were some frozen blueberries, so they are frozen. You can, I don't know if you can hear them banging around there. There you go. I don't know if that makes, I don't know if you need to know whether they're frozen or not. They are fresh blueberries though. I did buy them fresh. So I'm just gonna let that sit in there for a minute. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a spoon here, and while that's getting ready to boil, I'm gonna check the gravity of the cider here. Now, if you've never used one of these, this is a hydrometer. It measures the amount of sugar in a liquid. Now, these hydrometers work great for home brewing, though I will mention that they do not work on alcoholic beverages. If you have something that has alcohol in it, you do need an online calculator to do an adjustment. So just keep that in mind, that once you have an alcoholic beverage, the hydrometer will not always read correctly. So you saw there, I just put a couple drops on the blue part there, and then you put down the plastic piece and you just bounce it around here a little bit until you get most of the air bubbles out. And what this does is it measures the amount of light that is going through this liquid. And what they've found out, these geniuses, is that light goes through water at different angles depending on how much sugar is in there. So basically they are measuring the angle of the light that gets refracted through this piece of equipment, and the amount of sugar will change how it does that. And that's how they can therein measure the amount of sugar in a liquid. What you want to do is wait a couple seconds, make sure everything evens out there, and then you look through the eye hole here and you'll be able to measure and see how much sugar's in there. So right now, this is measuring at about 1.046 to 1.047, which gives that a good potential for alcohol. Off the top of my head, without getting in an online calculator, I'm going to say that's going to give me about 5 to 6% alcohol by volume, if, of course, we do ferment all of those sugars out of there. And now, at this point, we're just going to wait until the cider starts to boil. Now that it has come to a boil, what I want to do is just get some of that delicious blueberry juice out of there. And I'm going to use my potato masher here, and And I'm just going to simply press on the bag here and try to get those blueberries crushed up just a little bit to get some of that good juice out of there. And that steam is nice and warm. Super easy there. I'm going to go ahead and tilt the camera here so you can see what I'm doing. And then I'm simply just pressing on the bag here. Nothing too fancy. Super simple. And that's it for the cider here. What we can go ahead and do now is turn off the stove and move the cider off of the heat to now cool down. And this part, I'll just give it a couple hours. You can start this in the morning, let it sit, come back to it at the end of the day, let it cool down to room temperature. Then we're going to pour it into our fermenting vessel here and let it ferment. And while we're doing that and this is cooling, let's go ahead and go sanitize the fermenter. For sanitizing, I use this Star San sanitizer. It's a no rinse sanitizer, so it is food safe. You use 1/2 ounce for 2.5 gallons, so it's 1 ounce per 5 gallons. What I did is I just filled up the sink here. I put about 1/2 ounce in, so there's about 2.5 gallons in here. I don't get too crazy with my measurements. And then I've got all of my items here sanitizing that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using a funnel here. I'm going to be using, this is my fermenter. This is a 1/2 gallon growler. And then also I've taken apart my airlock. Here's the lid for the airlock. And then here is the base of the airlock. And then I've got this rubber bung that will go in top of the fermenter. And so the sanitizing solution takes a few minutes to work here. So I've got my growler here, my fermenter, filled up with sanitizer. I'm just going to mix it around a little bit so it can sanitize everything nicely. Basically, I'll let this sit for a few minutes, then I'll pull it out. And I won't rinse it, but I'll just drain everything out and I'll set it in the sink on the left side here to let everything dry off a bit. And I've also stole some of the sanitizer here in a cup that I will be using later to fill up my airlock. Here we are a couple hours later. The cider is now to room temperature and we're ready to get it into the growler / fermenter here. And I did run a bit of fresh sanitizer through it. You'll see these bubbles here, but this is a food safe sanitizer, a rinse free, so these little bubbles aren't going to hurt anything. So what I want to do now is get my blueberries out of the cider here. We'll let that drain a little bit. Good. Set that on a plate here, keep everything clean. And now into the fermenter. It's got a nice kind of purplish color here from the blueberries. There we go. And I'm going to swirl it around a little bit here. See if I can't introduce some oxygen into the liquid. Yeast likes a little bit of oxygen. And that'll be good. Again, we've got the EC 1118 yeast here. I stuck some scissors here in the sanitizing solution. Get those sanitized there. And now this here is a 5-gram pouch, which is enough yeast for 5 gallons. So I'm not going to use this whole thing. I'm actually going to save some of it because I'm going to make some homemade ginger ale later. And about half there I think will be good. Just fold this up and I'll put a rubber band on it, put it back in the fridge, and this won't stay in the fridge too long. I'm going to make some ginger ale out of it in the next couple days. And that is it. I'm not going to shake this up or anything right now. I'm just going to let it do its thing here, and I'm going to get the fermenter set up here with the airlock on top. So here's the vinyl rubber bung that I have for this. Again, nicely sanitized, so we're not introducing any bacteria. And then I'll go ahead and fill up the airlock here with sanitizing solution there. There's a line on here I'm looking for. Great. Got it where I want it. And then this is going to go into the pantry where it's nice and dark. It's actually the warmest part of the house in the winter and the coolest part of the house in the summer. It typically stays around 65 degrees. So there you go. Eventually this yeast is all going to get wet and it's going to fall to the bottom. It's going to start eating that delicious sugar there, and we're going to start producing alcohol. We'll get some bubbles here in the airlock. I'll show you that process as it goes on. And again, the gravity for this with the hydrometer there, I did 2 readings, and it's about 1.05 actually, which gives us it's going to give us a good potential for some alcohol there. So there you have it, some blueberry cider. We'll check in with it and we'll follow this through until the end and even see how it tastes. Now the fun part of waiting. And now it is time to try the cider. It has been conditioning for 2 weeks. You can see I bottled it just like I would bottle any type of home-brewed beer. And for this one, I shot for about 3 volumes of carbonation. I like my cider to be a bit more carbonated. Now, the blueberry cider, here we go. Let's go ahead and crack it open. A nice little hiss there. And let's take a peek at it as it comes out here. Oh, look at that color. Kind of a pinkish color there. Now, I have not tried this yet. Look at that though. That came up with a nice, good color to it. It looks really good. I did give this bottle, or some of this, to a family member, and they said it was delicious. Ooh. Yeah. Holy cow. That is really good. I am a fan of that. It's got about 6% alcohol by volume, as I measured it there, and it is really, really good. Homemade cider, really cheap. All you need is some blueberries, some cider or champagne yeast, and then of course some organic apple juice from the store. Now, if you would like to make your own, please do so. It's really simple. As for me, I'm going to go enjoy this glass of cider here. If you want to see more of my home brewing adventures, you can always check back in on my channel. If you're interested, you could subscribe, or just be sure to check back in as I'll be doing some more all grain and home brewing here. Enjoy.